So for us to begin, what we first want to do is look at this concept of what is this advanced graduate leadership program, specifically our new leadership development curriculum. And in that overview, we start with a reminder of what the AGLP was up until this point. It consisted of three components: our leadership and management training, which was workshops that were performed by Yale staff, faculty, employees, and other outside individuals. That was augmented by your self-guided professional development, where you took funds and pursued professional development opportunities of your choice, workshops and training programs, and then the internal internships, your experiential learning in senior officers' offices throughout Yale. What we have added to that is actually the version we're now doing with this first cohort. And that leadership development component is one where we have the focus on leadership competencies and emotional intelligence in a structured 26-month process. And we know that not everyone's going to be able to participate in all 26 months, but you're welcome to continue to participate upon your graduation. The professional development will continue, and some of those efforts will be focused more on professional guidance on leadership development, and then we'll remain having our internal internships. So to give the program its framework is we'll use methods that are based in research, documented research as our framework, and that starts with leadership itself. There's any number of different models of what is the concept of leadership. How do you learn to be a leader? What are some theories in leadership? We will use one by Coos and Posner, and that becomes our framework for leadership practices. That framework sits on top of two pedestals, two foundations. One of them is in the concept of leadership competencies. And we're partnering with work that has previously been completed at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in their leadership development model. The other foundation is the concept of emotional intelligence. And that emotional intelligence starts with the original work of Mayor Salovey Curacao. And that Salovey is, as I said, President Peter Salovey, David Curacao is a partner for our work, and then Professor Myers at the University of New Hampshire. Looking closer at these three elements, the leadership model of Coos and Posner is based on 5 practices of leadership. And if you notice, they have a registered trademark. We'll come to that later on in our talk. These two individuals, faculty members at another university, had written a book called The Leadership Challenge, and it has 5 fundamental principles: modeling the way, inspiring a vision, challenging the process, enabling others to participate, and encouraging the heart. That's going to be our framework for what does it mean to be a good leader. In addition to their book, they have a workbook that guides you through the process that we'll make reference to. I said the registered trademark and the asterisk. The asterisk refers to the leadershipchallenge.com, is that Coos and Posner have developed tools that are publicly available. I will say that most of the links in this presentation are actually live. This one I didn't update to be live, but I'll do that before posting it. So you have this as a framework of what we're going to do. We'll refer to these 5 practices throughout the 26 months of our leadership journey, leadership emotional intelligence journey, and they will be interjected throughout that experience. The leadership competencies is what we're actually starting today, and there's 2 sets of competencies. The first is on leading self, that to be a strong leader, first you need to have direction of your own self. And so the 7 set of competencies are identified that define a strong self leader. Those are complemented with 6 competencies in the area of leading others. Um, our goal is to have monthly seminars on the leadership competencies and then augment that with experiential training, reflections, and mentorship. That same model of learning, experiencing, reflecting, and mentorship will be duplicated in the area of emotional intelligence. So Dr. Curacao will lead us through 8 sessions of emotional intelligence. There's an introductory session, and then there's a session on the original work by Professor President Salovey. His original 1990 research will have a session on that. And then the application of emotional intelligence as a leader using the book that David Curacao and Peter Salovey had written on emotionally intelligent manager. Also in the works, the reference material for emotional intelligence is David's other books, including the one on A Leader's Guide of Emotional Intelligence. His seminar will begin next month, and that'll begin with an overview of the concept of emotional intelligence. I had alluded to the fundamental sequence of the learning, experience, reflection, and mentorship, and this is the model developed at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. And specifically, we're going to get to a set of references for all of us to learn from. And in the set of references is, in fact, the original paper that details this work. And that's a paper from faculty members at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy entitled Leadership is Everybody's Business. And this live link in the slide deck can get you to that paper. Now, today's discussion is reference material for everyone, and it's content heavy. So when we talk about learn, we're going to look at leadership and emotional intelligence theory, and that's going to be presented in bi-monthly seminars and then augmented with what I refer to as this external reference material that is supplied. Similarly, so the experiences will be crafted by Dee Dee and I and David where appropriate, such that if we take the leadership competency, accountability, and responsibility, we will craft a scenario for all of the participants to experience accountability and responsibility within your work and home life environment. So, for example, without getting ahead of ourselves, we're going to learn about accountability is for a group and responsibility is tied to individual tasks. An example experience, and this is just not defined yet because we want to refine it, but would be within your lab group and the publication of a paper, please, experience the concepts of responsibility and accountability. And so for a month, you'd be surrounded by that scenario, and basically in the midst of doing your normal work, you would be paying attention to examples of accountability and responsibility. And we will define those and present them at our next meeting. After one goes through that experiential learning, I think it's important that you pause for a minute, that in some way, shape, or form, you think about the experience, you reflect upon it, you record it, you maybe talk about it with someone else, and that's in that reflection period. And then finally, providing mentorship and guidance, that maybe as a group of students that have now gone through this, we come together with a facilitator that might be a member of the School of Engineering professional team, David Curacao, maybe we can get the president to participate. I just thinking about that now, and external certified professional coaches perhaps to help you review that guided sequence from the learning, experience, and reflection on the 13 leadership competencies, on the 8 components of emotional intelligence. I will pause for a minute and see if there's any questions, and I invite people to just go ahead and say them. And the floor is open for questions from our AGLP students and others as well. Okay, if we look at the schedule that I had just alluded to, on that schedule is the fact that we will be doing monthly seminars in leadership competencies and then emotional intelligence. And the last doorbell was actually Dr. David Caruso, who was able to join us. Sorry, David. And do you want to just say a few words about the emotional intelligence components of the program?
Sure, thank you. I'm here for a vaccination, so I'm sitting in a parking lot, so I apologize.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so the few words are, in an ideal world, the emotional intelligence piece would be embedded in everything you do, including now, right? So it consists of 4 related hard skills. It is an intelligence. You can leverage your analytical ability. And so I want you to always think about those 4 basic skills or questions. How are you feeling? How are other people feeling? How are these feelings impacting your thinking and decision-making? Why do we feel this way? And how do we manage those emotions and feelings in order to facilitate better decisions, behaviors, judgments, and so forth? So it's very simple and simplistic, but the challenge is I have yet to meet someone who does these things at a very high level of skill on a consistent basis in real time under stressful conditions. So again, it does sound simple, and it is very simple, but it's super hard to apply these skills as I just mentioned. So I'm excited about this and really pleased and honored to be part of the program.
No, and thank you. And we too are very pleased and honored. And as we look at the concept of emotional intelligence, the original work in this field was done by our very president of the university. And so emotional intelligence is a component of many leadership development programs. And to have David and President Salave basically on our team delivering this, it is just no other place. I often use a phrase within the School of Engineering that, what better place would you want to be than the School of Engineering? And what better place would you want to be learning emotional intelligence but at Yale University? So we're just super delighted. And David, thank you for coming in the midst of a very busy day. He has a meeting afterwards, able to fit in the call and route to some other activities. So we'll move forward. And again, thank you very much. If anything comes up, please just go ahead and jump into the conversation. Delighted to have you.
I will join my other call, but I just want to quickly say hello and thank you all. And if anybody has any questions, you'll have my contact details. So looking forward to working with everybody very, very much. So thank you.
Thank you. So that sequence that we just spoke about, the leadership competencies start today. So I'm speaking rather rapidly so we can get the introduction to the whole program here. Next month in March, David will lead us on our emotional intelligence journey. He will speak on this overview of the history of emotional intelligence, what it is not, some models, and then its importance and measurement. And the concept that you can assess emotional intelligence will be a component of this program. Also in March, we have the first practicum. And this is what I had described briefly, where we will document opportunities for you within your work life, within your home life, to practice and focus on the concepts of accountability and responsibility. The sequence then picks up in April, where our seminar, noon seminar, will focus on the second leadership competency in self, and that's aligning values. That practicum during April will be one of observing emotional intelligence in your work life and in your home life. And so you see this concept of learning, you see this concept of experience. We work in the reflection and the mentorship as well. And that sequence is going to be a little bit more apparent towards the end. If we put all these together, as I had mentioned, the 13 leadership competencies with the 8 emotional intelligence components, spacing them out is a curriculum that, in fact, lasts 26 months. The AGLP students that are with us now will be the first cohort. In September, this schedule shows that schedule for the first cohort. We will add the new class of AGLP fellows, and they will begin with this very talk, the Leading Self, Accountability, and Responsibility. So as we're going through the program with the first cohort in September, we'll add the new group of students to the program. Officially, we can pause here for a second and see if there are any questions on the overall program itself. So the floor is open. All right, I will add that in addition to the AGLP students, Saram Abbas and Antonio Medina, who are fellows at the Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design, which means that they work here, but they also are on a fellowship to develop their own skills in making, their own skills in coding, their own skills in being a leader, will be participating as part of this cohort. So we welcome Antonio and Saram to our group as well. All right. Switch the channel, and now we go into the concept of the first leading self competency on accountability and responsibility. What does that actually mean? Well, before we dig into that, if we back up and understand this leadership framework, the Coos and Posner model, as I'm referring to it, they articulate their framework, one in the book that they have written called The Leadership Challenge, but also with a series of resources, which are a website, leadershipchallenge.com. And on that website, which I am referencing with our presentation, is in fact the description of their 5 practices of exemplary leadership that we had seen before. The very, very first practice is one called modeling the way, where you have your established principles in the way that we as individuals should pursue our goals. There's standards of excellence, there's examples for others to follow. And why I am bringing this up right now is in our first set of competencies, where we're looking at what does it mean to develop oneself as a leader. You are the leader for others to go ahead and follow. So you can sort of see how this framework, which I'm putting up in one slide, so I know that we don't understand it with a single slide, but we'll be referring to this over the course of our curriculum, that the framework of practicing leadership begins with modeling the way. So we as individuals need to make sure that we have our own self-competencies established. This also it gives us a little bit of a model of how these leadership practices will be interjected into the leadership seminars as we cover the competencies on leading ourselves and leading others. And we'll make use of this material more formally within the seminar series as well. Looking now specifically at the list of leading self competencies, they begin with this concept of accountability and responsibility. Adding the other words, we see things like values and followership, the aspect of your own physical health and your well-being, both mentally and physically, being aware and the ability to be a self-learner is important, as well as for us really key is proficiency within our discipline, our technical proficiency. Those are the topics we're going to be focusing on in our seminars and then experiencing. Just because we have one slide today on responsibility and accountability makes none of us an expert in this area, but this journey that we're on is one of opportunity for everyone to dig in, to take these concepts of responsibility and accountability and begin a little bit of your own journey. What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be accountable? So the goal of our seminars is to give you some initial tools and give you some initial references and allow you to carry things on in your own world. As Dee Dee and I have prepared this program, we've both done a lot of self-education. I've had the benefit of being a Coast Guard officer, so participating in leadership training when I was your age and for 26 years within the Coast Guard. So I have that background, but it wasn't until now that I'm put in a position of sharing specifically some components on the competencies that it's causing me to sit back and think, like, what do I need to know so that I am doing the right thing and we're conveying the right thing? So this whole aspect of self-learning is important, and it's been critical. Now, we're getting assistance of the people that developed this program at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, and then augmenting that with our own references. But each of the Advanced Graduate Leadership Program participants, and Antonio and Sarum, can take these nuggets and go off and add to it in your own. One of the things that I've been doing is a lot of self-learning, actually on the treadmill, of finding instructional videos, podcasts, and learning about things while taking care of my own health and well-being. So, digging in, responsibility. It comes down to the being, quote, responsible for delivering a task, and the individual who is responsible for that task. The aggregate of multiple responsibilities falls under the umbrella of the accountability. And we're going to see some examples here in a moment and some case studies to reinforce this. So many definitions. The one that we'll be using is this concept of responsibility for specific tasks, accountability for the aggregate of the tasks. So moving on down, we see that the individuals become responsible for specific tasks within a project, but the leader is accountable for all of those tasks. As a leader, you can delegate this concept of responsibility to individuals, but you cannot delegate the accountability. The leader remains the person accountable. A small example, within your labs, people come and go, and you can celebrate people departing. What does that mean? There's going to be an event, and someone is going to be responsible for the invites, a gift, the food, the coordination. Those are all the individual tasks where there is a responsibility for that. The leader who's coordinating all this is the person accountable for all of those individual tasks. I know it's a very simple example, but as we're going to walk through these case studies, they're going to get a little bit more complicated and cause you maybe to scratch your head. Corporate leadership. We can look at the chief executive officer who is accountable to the board of directors. Within the United States, that companies have various rights and responsibilities and are managed as a public entity for a public company by a board of directors. That board of directors appoints a chief executive officer. That chief executive officer is accountable for everything within their organization, all of the tasks within their organizations, and they're accountable to the board. The staff members, the employees under the CEO, are responsible for these specific tasks. In general, the CEO has very few direct responsibilities, but remains accountable for numerous tasks on the operation of the company itself. One other point that I want to mention now, and it'll kind of come up in our case study, is the concept of accountability is established in advance. The CEO takes a position knowing that she or he is accountable for everything within that company under their watch. The concept of blame follows an event. So people are accountable in advance, and then this concept of blame established after an event occurs. As I had mentioned before, we're providing you with tools, we're providing you with references, we're providing you with guidance. And on the concept of accountability, two pieces of reference are actually provided to get us started in this topic. Again, you're not going to be an authority on the concept of accountability and responsibility, but I think if you spend this month thinking about it and next month practicing it, you're going to have a fundamental understanding of what those two words mean and how they're important to you as a leader. To dig in and to learn more about the concept of accountability, we'll refer to the Center for Creative Leadership, which is a nonprofit that advances concept along leadership. They offer 5 tasks of improvement when it comes to the area of accountability. And the first, as a leader, is to support the people that you are working with, give support to your team, and also provide them with freedom, the freedom to learn, the freedom to act, the freedom to innovate. An effective team is one that shares the information, and hopefully as we're speaking about this, you can now think of it in your lab context, you can think about it within the Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design context of the value of trading that information that we all do as individuals to advance the work of the group. You need help and support doing these tasks that you'd be responsible for, and the leader is accountable when they provide those resources to the members of the team. And the last component is one of clarity. Assigning tasks, being very, very clear so people can carry those out and not have ambiguity. Again, the website of the Center for Creative Leadership provides more details that everyone can dig into and learn more about, well, what does it mean about providing resources? So I encourage you post-seminar to look at that and add that to your repertoire. The Office of Personnel Management, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, is another reference on leadership accountability. And I found that their work, and it's the webpage that's listed here, there's a expanded address behind that, but that's a linkable webpage there. Takes you to a very well done description of implementing accountability as a leader. And included in that description are these 5 bullets, where 3 of them map perfectly to what we had just seen for the Center for Creative Leadership. They begin with giving a clear guidance on the goals and the challenges. The concept of coaching members on your team, supporting them for things that are needed for their job. OPM, not surprisingly, offers guidance on monitoring progress so that we're aware as leaders of where the team stands, project management applications within the engineering world, and then the concept of providing the training, providing the resources for people to do the tasks, complete the tasks that are assigned them. And the last component of Office of Personnel Management, very, very important, is recognizing employees for their performance, whether that's through words done informally or more formal advancement compensation systems. So these 2 references are provided for the participants of the program to look at, to learn, and to develop yourself in this area of what is leadership accountability, what is leadership responsibility, what are some ways that a leader can develop their skills in this concept. All right, we're gonna pause for a minute and get you engaged in a case study. So our first case study comes from former U.S. Navy Secretary Don Winter. He delivered a talk on the concept of leadership responsibility and accountability, and he adds in there authority, at the University of Michigan. So his talk is 30 minutes followed by a 20-minute question and answer period. And in that, he speaks about a number of scenarios that are engineering based. They happen to be disasters, which allows us to focus on some things. But we ask the question is, who is accountable and who is responsible? So we'll begin with Secretary Winter's description of one of those elements. I will advance our talk in segments, so please bear with me as you may see the screen come and go. And I'm going to make sure that we actually can hear. So if you do not hear Secretary Winter, please let me know.
Let me switch to another example here. I'm going to talk about the Macondo Well, commonly known as Deepwater Horizon. Deepwater Horizon is actually the name of the oil drilling rig that was used to develop the Macondo Well. About 10 years ago, 11 workers were killed when there was a blowout, an explosion and fire associated with the Macondo Well. And this not only killed 11 people on the rig, but also caused just tremendous environmental, ecological, and economic damage to the whole Gulf region.
So that sets up the disaster. And we can now look at some of the contributing elements for that incident.
But effectively, the well had been drilled. There was a decision made to do what's called a well sealing and abandonment, with the idea that they would come back to the area after the infrastructure was installed that would provide a mechanism of taking the oil from that area and sending it back to shore. The way of sealing the well was using cement. That cement was tested multiple times, and that cement was found to be wanting multiple times. Nonetheless, the decision was made to go ahead and abandon the well. That precipitated the start of hydrocarbon flow. The crew did not respond to that effectively, and the net was we had a total loss of control of the well, what's known as a blowout.
So there is this scenario of what led to this disaster?
Figuring out who was accountable in all of this was complicated furthermore by just the business arrangements that are used offshore. It's a very complex business. There's a joint venture who actually has the lease. One of the members of the joint venture, in this case BP, is deemed to be the operating contractor. That operating contractor hires a rig that is operated actually by the rig owner. And oh, by the way, the operating company, BP, hires the people that are going to do many of the other services, like cementing, in which case the subject was Halliburton.
So the table is set for who is accountable and who is responsible for this significant industrial disaster. And as we ponder the question, we learn some additional details about the infrastructure on the well, the support team that is on the well, as well as some about the maritime industry.
But we get into the question of, well, who is really responsible? Is it just the company or is it the people in the company? And one of the things, if you go and take a look at BP's answer to this, because they had their own report, first of all, their argument is the principal culpable individual, the principal individuals that should be accountable were Halliburton, the people that were doing the cementing. And oh, by the way, if there's anybody in BP that's accountable, it's the two people that they had as representatives on the rig.
And so we have this scenario of accountability looked at from a number of different avenues, from the public at large or the Department of Justice view, from the company itself. But the question remains to us is who is accountable and who is responsible.
It comes out in the maritime community. In the old days, a ship that goes out of port, pretty soon it's over the horizon, and the master of the ship is responsible for everything. No other way of dealing with it. And that concept initially came up in the offshore oil and gas industry. The people on the vessel, on the rig, have to have the total and complete control and have all of the authorities necessary to conduct their business. Even though in many cases they really had limited formal education on many of the matters that they were dealing with. At the time that this event occurred 10 years ago, we were starting to see a way out of all of this with satellite communications. It is possible to have real-time information associated with wells all over the world shipped back to a common area where they can be overseen and where people can be brought in to be able to assist in any critical decision. The real-time operations center here, shown in the photo, is Shell's facility. At the time, just after the Deepwater Horizon blowout, they were watching wells. This was Shell now, was watching wells in the Caspian Sea from New Orleans. Easy to do. Not all companies bought into the idea. They didn't buy into it for several reasons. One of which was they thought that having somebody overseeing what was going on in the rig undercut the authority of the people out in the rig, that the people out in the rig would expect to get second-guessed and would not put their best thoughts into the matter.
So the opportunity now rests with us. We saw this end with the implementation of external watch, external decision-making, and these operation centers then became the units that are responsible and accountable. So for a couple of minutes, we're gonna try a small conversation of who, and I know that we just covered an industrial disaster in 2 minutes, but the case study is there. We can go back and look at it on our own. But in this case, who actually is responsible for this industrial disaster? Please speak up. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. I think it's the operating team on the oil rig. Even though I think, I don't know the specific relationship between the two representatives from the BP versus the operation, whether there are a supervising entity. I didn't catch that in the video. If they were, then I think the two supervising body who should be responsible, because they should be implementing safety measures and as well as having the standard protocols up to date, aligned with all the government regulations. But if they are not in a supervising position, I think whoever's directly involved on the oil rig is responsible.
Good. Mary Kate had an offer as well. Please.
Yeah, I think they mentioned the concrete companies had found several times that the concrete they were using wasn't up to standards. And so some responsibility definitely lies there, and whoever decided to continue using that concrete. Sorry, my little Joe.
No, all good, all good.
Who has some things to say as well.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so definitely I would think responsibility lies with the manufacturer of the concrete as well as the people who decided to continue even though the testing hadn't been 100%.
And on the concept of accountability, anyone want to take a stab using our simple definitions of who obviously is accountable for this disaster? Go ahead, Antonio.
Yeah,
or Margaret.
go for it, Antonio. Oh, I was just going to mention like about how said the supervising bodies who were aware of the concrete manufacturers deficits, but also of the he alluded to like the non-formal education with regards to all of the safety measures and material usage that were there. So the supervising bodies should be ultimately held accountable for that.
And I think that's a fair assessment for this case study. Now, Margaret, we're going to put you on guard because you're going to get the next question. So you got to pay attention here in our second case study here. This case study comes from this week's Wall Street Journal. And the concept is we're delivering vaccines. And somehow, because people think that they're better than established system, they find ways to, quote, skip the line. And the article, which is referenced through the link there, details the following, which I'm going to summarize rather quickly. While millions of Americans wait for their turn in line for COVID vaccine rollout, some people are securing coveted injections before they are eligible by tapping connections, circumventing their state rules. Government officials have criticized the line cutters. Prosecutors in at least 2 states have launched reviews, and some hospitals have had their vaccine allotments curtailed by health authorities as punishment for questionable vaccination practices. Each state and some local jurisdictions have set up different rules for who gets vaccinated first and where they're distributed. In addition to vaccine supply shortages, the lack of a centralized registration system in many areas has set off a scramble for doses. Some officials said because the rollout has involved so many jurisdictions with different rules, timelines, and supplies, it has been impossible for states or the federal government to ensure everyone is following the rules. We're not the vaccine police, says Max Rice, spokesman for Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont, a Democrat. We're putting a lot of trust in local providers to make sure they're vaccinating the most at-risk people in their communities. I just gave you 4 paragraphs of a much longer article, but I think you get the gist of it. And Margaret, the question comes to you for vaccinations within Connecticut. Who is responsible for delivering the shots in the arm? And who within the state of Connecticut do you think is actually accountable for Connecticut's vaccination program? You're up.
Yeah, this is a different case study because I feel like I know more about this one, the Deepwater Horizon spill. For the responsible party, I feel like it's the healthcare professionals, the hospitals, the people who are in the area, the local providers, as Max Rice said it, just because they have connections to the people who are getting vaccinated, the healthcare providers, the people over 75. The who is accountable question, I think, is a little harder because I would say that some aspect of the State Department's accountable, since they are the ones who are giving out the vaccines in some manner.
Other thoughts on the accountability? And that's very, very good. So thank you for getting us going there. Accountability within the state of Connecticut.
This almost seems like everyone's trying to not be accountable based on the way that read. But it seems like if it's a state-run program, then it's whoever's the head of the state. So I feel like Lamont really should be the one who's accountable for if the vaccination program is working or not, and that they should be doing more to ensure that the people that are responsible are actually doing it correctly. Because I do know there are situations where like the vaccine is going to expire, and so they've just been grabbing random people in order to use the doses, and they're not actually following any guidelines, but just because they have extra doses. And so if there's like ways that they can avoid that, or like Lamont can implement better systems to get the vaccine out to avoid like line skipping, I think that he's the one who's ultimately accountable for Connecticut. Yeah.
And I think this article is very interesting because we don't have a quote from the governor, but rather for a spokesman from the governor. So Howard had his hand up, and I'm actually going to give you a new question to take on for same topic, but let's switch to Yale University. Okay, so who is responsible for delivering the shots in the arm at Yale? And if we focus on Yale University and not Yale New Haven Health System, the hospital, who is accountable for Yale's vaccination program at Yale University? So, two questions there for you.
I'm just gonna go off what Elise was saying. Basically, the shots in the arms are people at the healthcare. Well, I guess like the healthcare providers are responsible for shots in the arm, right? And then accountability. I don't know the governing body for the vaccination program, but I know there's an advisory committee on the vaccination program at Yale. But people who eventually call the shots are, I think, Paul or.
So Dr. Paul Jensen is the head of Yale New Haven Health for Yale University. And one could say that as the leader of that healthcare unit, he is in fact the person accountable for the vaccination program. That is perfectly, I think, a good assignment of that accountability. If we take a step back even more so, at Yale University, who ultimately becomes accountable is, insert the name,
Peter Salovey.
President Salovey. So it comes with the territory. And one of our references is going to allude to this with the phrase, the buck stops here, by, instead of the president of the university, the president of the United States. So good. I'm glad that this worked, and it shows us a little bit of these concepts are surrounding us. And there's ways for us to see their practice implemented. Back to us, and to look at your development as a leader. We've now had the first part, a seminar, planting the seeds on accountability and responsibility. And I'm going to challenge you that at your own pace to take some of these references and dig in over this month. Next month, you're going to be involved in a practicum. We're going to give you some scenarios within your workplace, within your life place, that you can observe, practice accountability, responsibility, and action, and then record your thoughts by writing, by discussion with colleagues, friends, family, that form of reflection. And then in April, we'll come back and try to provide context to this in the guided mentorship. So that's how the sequence actually works. But we're doing things more than one. And so in February, we're also, I'm sorry, if we take and align these, we can put the activities within March together, experience and reflection together. As we move forward, we actually see that in March, we now begin this theory exploration of emotional intelligence with David Crusoe. And so we're going to be experiencing competencies, and in the first seminar, learning the theory on emotional intelligence. And then in April, as we get guided mentorship on the leadership competency, you'll be experiencing the emotional intelligence within your workplace, looking for examples of people that are demonstrating empathy, people that yourself, how you may have contained your mood, adjusted your mood, and then reflect back on that during the month, and then get some guided development with the mentorship. So if you put this together, once we get into February, March, April, there's going to be 4 activities that'll happen each month. You'll be learning new content. You're going to be experiencing and reflecting on the prior content, and then getting guidance on your prior experiences and reflection. And even though this looks like quite a bit. If we put it in context, the learn blocks are single 1-hour seminars that we're going to be doing at lunchtime. The experience takes place within your environment, and so it's sort of observation, jotting notes down over the course of the month. And then we will have a review of that. You can think of that as the mentorship component, as well as a preview of the next batch of experiences. So I'm really, really excited how we're taking this learn, experience, reflection, mentorship model, and then building this program that covers leadership, covers emotional intelligence, covers leadership, and covers emotional intelligence. The opportunity to learn is one of yours, and this is all by choice. So our 3 references on the accountability and responsibility are presented. 2 of them are text documents, and the 3rd is a podcast. So I'm looking to Didi and I are searching for more than single source references. So we have a paper on the concept of accountability and responsibility. And then the second reference is a book chapter from the world of public relations. And it is very, very solid in the general case, in the first part and the last part of the book chapter. And so that's where I'm saying skip pages 24 to 31, because that is very particular to the world of public relations. But that book chapter gives fundamental explanation of responsibility and accountability, and it goes back to Aristotle. So it's very, very well written, and it pushes us to think of these words in other dimensions. And some of the examples from PR actually have been very, very helpful for myself, especially looking back at Deepwater Horizon. The podcast. Gene Kranz was the flight controller for the Apollo missions, and he talks about leadership in general, specifically accountability, responsibility for the astronauts and for the space program. A small recognition and a note that we are very aware of this, but the work that he described is from the 1960s and the 1970s. And that was one that is a male-oriented perspective of the pursuit to space, which we accomplished in a 10-year goal. I contend that if we allowed all of humanity to accomplishment, it would have only taken us 5 years. And we'll see that in some of the work, moving forward. So noting that very, very good words by Gene Kranz with an awareness of the times that he had said them. The last article is one that I had mentioned before. It's a reference on what we're talking about, this leadership concept, the learning, experience, reflection, and mentorship that is detailed in a management journal. And with that, we've got the stage for what's happening. So I'm gonna converse with you all to identify our next meeting. So between now and then, in the month of February, you can dig into some of these references. I encourage you to engage in dialogue. Myself and Didi, a little question, or it's odd now that we don't see each other in the hallway, but we can deal with that. Towards the end of this month, we'll take a noon period and look at what were the readings, so the summary of this authority and responsibility, and also so we're going to review that learning material and then preview the experiential learning that we've crafted. So we'll unveil the actual vignettes that you'll be placing yourself in during your normal work, and talk a little bit about what comes on the reflection aspect and what comes on the mentorship. In March, our seminar will be David Caruso on emotional intelligence, and then we'll follow that up midpoint in the month X+14 with debriefing on your practicum of authority and responsibility, and then preparing for the next practicum in emotional intelligence. So there we are, 12:58, a lot. And our future talks won't be as condensed because we had to do two things today. We had to introduce this whole curriculum, and then we had to do the focus on accountability and responsibility. So with that, I wish everybody well. Just really, really super delighted to have you participate. All of our work will be archived. So if you can't participate in a session, we've recorded this and it'll be available. The slides I will send to you, Dee Dee and I will send to you, so that even if you can't participate synchronously, the work is there for you to participate asynchronously. So with that, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Really, really super excited about this program and look forward to working with you, to gaining your insights, your feedback on what we can do. It's super aggressive, but I think it's also super beneficial. So thank you all.